The Honda Civic gets a major update for 2025 because it's now available as a hybrid. In fact, it gets the same powertrain that's found in the Accord and the CR-V. This model in particular is the 2025 Honda Civic Sport Hybrid Sedan, but it's also available as a hatchback. But either way, the new Civic is now the ultimate economy car. Previously, the only point of getting a hybrid was to save money on gas, and while that's still kind of the case today, that's no longer the main advantage, especially with the new Civic. In fact, here in California, where gas is around $4 a gallon, it would take you around 80,000 miles to break even on the $2,500 upgrade from the Sport to the Sport Hybrid. The rest of what you're paying for is power. And that's just one of the things that have been learned from electric vehicles that are now finally being implemented into hybrids like this. And that's that you don't need to make sacrifices to efficiency in the name of performance like you would with a traditional gas-powered car, and that's exactly what's happening here. Upgrading to the hybrid gives you a more than 30% jump in power and 50% more torque while still getting 50 miles per gallon. It's kind of like going from a 4-cylinder to a V6 while still saving tons on gas. While the hybrid powertrain is the main upgrade for 2025, there are some small styling changes, mostly in the front. This area in the outgoing model had this sort of bulbous shape that kind of had a beluga shape to it. That's now fixed. I think they did a pretty good job with that. The bottom section of the bumper has some small changes. It actually sticks out a little bit more than it used to. Other than that, there's some small changes. We've got a body color painted spoiler on the bottom and accent around the headlights, and that's about it, as you'd expect from a mid-cycle refresh. Over in the back, the changes are even more subtle because only for the sedan you get a smoked taillight. That's all that's new. So if you're ever behind a Civic and wondering if it's the latest model, if it's got a smoked taillight, now you know. Inside of the Civic remains impressive as it has been. This is one of my favorite interiors. I love how the dials feel, the vents feel. However, for your $2,500 over the standard Sport, you're not really getting all that much. You get a moonroof, you get dual zone climate and heated seats, but that's about it. I do want to mention that the driver's seat is very comfortable. I mean, the seats are manual, which is actually something I'd prefer in a Civic anyways, but I do want to note how far back these seats go. I mean, all the way back, I can kind of barely floor it. This is further back than I would normally drive. I'm 6 foot, so if you're a taller driver, this compact car might actually be pretty comfortable for you. Now, one big disappointment is this infotainment system. This is the same exact one found in the base LX model, and that's just a big disappointment for a car that costs $30,000. The only way to get the better infotainment system with Google built in is to buy the touring model, and I kind of feel like that's just not a smart move for Honda. Even the menus in here are kind of just like old and gray, and you can't really change them even though it's a nice touchscreen. I have a 2018 Civic EX, which is just one step above the LX model, and it's pretty much the same exact thing as this. Even the reverse camera looks exactly the same, so it's kind of a disappointment here. I don't know what to tell you. The instrument cluster is okay. It's a half digital display, which I don't really like, but on the full digital display that's on the touring model, the right side is just your speedometer anyways, so you're not really missing out on much. However, you are missing out on a battery gauge, which isn't available on the left side, which you'd find in the touring model, and your gas gauge would be on the right, but instead you just have your gas gauge on the bottom, and the only way to see the battery is to go to the power mode that kind of shows you what the car is doing, which is a cool screen, but you can't see anything else like your fuel economy and stuff like that. All right, let's take the Civic out for a drive, but first let's talk about fuel economy because I do have some numbers and quite a few miles here. Over the last 800 miles or so, I averaged 48.2 miles per gallon. Now, a lot of that, about 300 miles of that, was me driving at freeway speeds up the mountains in hot weather, over 100-degree weather, and during that trip, I averaged 45.2 miles per gallon, which is lower than expected. Slight correction, I was looking at the wrong screenshot because that was just in one direction. Including the return trip, I averaged 46.5 miles per gallon over about 600 miles. However, when I came back, I reset the trip, and so far I've been averaging 53.9 miles per gallon. That was as high as 55 miles per gallon. And I'm not hypermiling anyway, by the way. I have the climate controls on. I'm driving the car as I would normally drive, and that's just where this car has been really impressive in terms of fuel economy. All right, driving the new Honda Civic Hybrid Sport. Now, one of the first things I want to get out of the way is if you look at this car on paper and you compare it to something like the Accord, You're going to be wondering why anyone would go for an Accord over the Civic Hybrid. I mean, this car is way more powerful, it's way more efficient. It feels like you're getting a lot more car in the Civic than you are the Accord. However, when you drive the Civic, it does become very obvious that this is a Civic. There's a little bit of engine noise. This car rides like a Civic. It feels like a Civic. There's a road noise like a Civic. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just this car is not a replacement for what you'd find in an Accord. That's just something to keep in mind. However, it is nice having access to some power when you need it. So one nice update for 2025 is with Honda Sensing. The lane centering's been improved, the active cruise control has been improved. It's actually a very impressive system. I would say it lane centers just as good as a person now. It's no longer ping-ponging. It really is really nice. In fact, I'm using it right now in some moderate traffic. The car is doing everything, and because it has a capacitive steering wheel, all you have to do is put your hand on the wheel and just relax, and the car kind of does everything. In fact, I did over 3 hours with Honda Sensing being in control most of the time, and when I arrived to my destination, I had basically zero driver fatigue. It feels like the Civic is at a point where it does 90% of the freeway driving, and any improvements to the system is kind of icing on the cake. It takes pretty good curves. It follows the car in front of you perfectly, whether it's in heavy, moderate, or light traffic. It really is a nice system, and it's nice that this is available in something like a Civic. Now, because this is a hybrid, to make it a little more engaging, this car comes with paddle shifters, and the paddle shifters are for regenerative braking only. The left side increases the regenerative braking and the right side decreases it. Now, in the Honda Accord, I was using the paddles all the time. It's kind of fun just to be able to rely on the regenerative braking alone to bring the car to a stop. But in the Civic, the regenerative braking hardly does anything. It's kind of like if you're just lightly tapping the brakes. It's kind of a small disappointment, and I really do wish they fix that and make it more like the Accord. So I actually found some footage decelerating with the Accord's paddle shifters from about 45 miles an hour and replicated that with the Civic, but as you can see, the Accord reaches that end point of around 7 to 8 miles an hour about 9 seconds earlier than the Civic. It appears that the Accord has 6 stops of regen, while the Civic only has 4, which probably explains the difference here. Now, another thing that you got are the different drive modes. You've got Sport, Normal, and Economy. If you go with the Touring model, you also get a individual mode that kind of allows you to customize everything, but there's actually a pretty noticeable difference between each one. Now, here I am kind of accelerating from a stop. If I punch it, it goes. It really does feel very quick, almost like you're driving an electric vehicle. The acceleration off the line is very impressive in Sport mode. The new Civic Hybrid really seems like a home run from Honda. The 2-motor hybrid powertrain is a joy to drive, and with performance upgrades like 50% more torque, it's a huge upgrade over the standard Civic, and unlike previous years, the powertrain upgrade is a leap forward in power and efficiency rather than a marginal bump. I'm actually not sure if there's ever been a non-performance Civic producing more power than an entry-level Accord, which is a big win for the Civic and kind of sets a higher bar for the Accord to meet. Honda has really refined its hybrid system, and it delivers power really smooth, unlike what you'd find in a modern turbo. Now, while the engine noise might not be as isolated from the cabin as the Accord hybrids, it still delivers a quiet ride, especially at lower speeds. And of course, when you do hear that engine noise, Honda has added simulated gear shifts, and believe it or not, it's really well done and gives you a feeling of driving a traditional automatic over a droney CVT that seemed inescapable in recent years. While it's easy to look at competitors and think, well, the Prius is more efficient or that the Corolla is a lot cheaper, the reality is nothing comes close to delivering the Civic's perfect combination of fuel economy, practicality, interior space, and performance. Honda made no sacrifices with the Civic Hybrid. They didn't take away interior space or cargo capacity, and it doesn't rely on rare, skinny tires to maximize efficiency. In fact, this is the biggest, most efficient, and most powerful non-Type R Civic ever, and I really think it is the ultimate economy car. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Honda for loaning me the Civic, and I'll see you on the next one.